Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome back to the ONYX TAVERN vlog series on Ressha Sentai ToQger. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, and in our final coverage of Ressha Sentai ToQger, we will be covering their epilogue film, Ressha Sentai ToQger Returns, Super ToQ Nanago of Dreams. Now, I do call this an epilogue film. I don't know what the official title is, but it's basically that direct-to-video, direct-to-DVD, wherever you want to call it, film that occurs after the series finale. Now, I actually debated whether or not I should actually go ahead and cover this since it's not part of the series proper. But as far as continuity is concerned, this is a part of ToQger continuity. It is part of Super Sentai continuity. Nothing in this contradicts that, to my knowledge. And of course, since the ToQger final, in my opinion, was a little lackluster, I really want to see what they could do here. You know, they have obvious limitations with the television format. 22 minutes to do X, Y, and Z. And with the direct-to-DVD market, I mean, we've seen things like, Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker, and the things it was able to go ahead and do by being on a direct-to-DVD format and not being bound by, rules and censorship of the television show. So, I thought to myself, hey, maybe this is a good time for them to redeem themselves. Maybe they were being held back by the television production. Now that they can get direct to DVD, they can actually do a couple of things that they didn't get to explore in the series, and maybe make up for that lackluster finale. And, after watching it a couple of times, taking my notes and stuff, you actually see that there is just the slightest grain of a story in there. That there is something actually interesting and worth exploring with the ToQger concept. Unfortunately, the series or the show, the movie, the movie does not explore it the way it should. It actually comments on it and then dismisses it immediately without actually addressing the issue. I mean, it's like watching Fox News, basically, is the best way I can describe it. But let's get into what the film is. I'll tell you guys what I like, what I didn't like about this. And again, I'm going to be looking at this as a follow-up to ToQger, as a continued adventure that they had. So I will still be relating this to the overall series and things that it did pick up and did not pick up on. And again, I'm not going to do a full analysis of ToQger as a whole until later, once I finish this video. All right, so in the year 2025, yes, a new shadow monster has appeared, the Grand Duke. As the ToQger keep calling him throughout the movie, they call him the Fart because apparently his name can be translated as a pun to fart. But I'm not going to be that juvenile about it, so I'm just going to call him the Grand Duke. So the Grand Duke comes into, what is the present at this point for the ToQger, the year 2025, and they've all grown up into basically their adult teenage bodies. So where they are officially aged in the series, they have now naturally aged into their adult forms. The Grand Duke attacks them, and as they are fleeing from the Grand Duke, which is important, and I'll point that out, point something about that later, they fall through a time portal into the past to the year 2017. And it's this point in history where the ToQger, it's been 2 years since their original adventures, or 3 years at this point, I think. Yeah, 3 years since their original adventures. And they are now graduating from elementary school. But as they are graduating from elementary school, Wright has the idea to go find Akira. And, because he wants them to come to the graduation ceremony for, sentimental value and everything. But they get tangled up with the Grand Duke, who also appears into the past. And what we have is basically the future ToQger meeting the past ToQger. And the thing about this that I find interesting is that it's established at the beginning of the film that the ToQger can no longer see the rainbow line. That as they have grown up, they have lost their imagination. Not even Wright, who has the most powerful imagination of the five, can no longer see the rainbow line. He cannot go ahead and see Akira anymore since he's attached to the rainbow line. And worst of all, they can't morph. And that's a big problem I'm going to get into as we get along here. But I want to go ahead and address what this first part is. Because here, I'll give away what happened. So basically, Glitter has opened a time portal into the past to bring the future ToQger to help themselves in the past. Or at least that's the implication to it. What I believe the implication is that Glitter brought the present ToQger into the past to help them in the future. Because it's they call it a time paradox within the film, but I don't really think it's a time paradox. They call the portal a paradox, and again, that's not true. That's just a portal, and that was pointed out in Ranger Wiki, and I completely agree with that. A paradox is, like the grandfather paradox. You go back in time to kill your grandfather. If you kill your grandfather, you can't be born to go back and kill your grandfather. So there is no real paradox in here. The way that this is presented is that they go back in time, they help themselves, but the ToQger, the future ToQgers, or the adult ToQgers, I'm going to call them, the adults go back in time and they inform them as to what's happening, not to attack this guy or go here to find that and stuff, without actually altering the past. So it's not really a paradox as it is they're going back in time and interfering with the past, but nothing they're doing is necessarily changing the past. Let me kind of break it down. I know it's a little confusing. Again, this is why I had to watch it 2 times to figure it out. To the best of my knowledge, this is what's happening in the film. Okay, we start off with the original timeline. It's 2017. The ToQger are graduating. They're looking for a cure. They get attacked by the Grand Duke. Through the events of the film, they're able to defeat the Grand Duke, or at least they assume they defeat him, but the Grand Duke actually runs away. So the Grand Duke returns in the year 2025 and fights the present ToQger. Now, here's where I think the deviation happens, because at the beginning of the film, when the Grand Duke attacks the adults, they go back in time. Because what this is for their benefit to be able to morph and become the ToQger again, because they lost their imagination. By going back into the past, they're not helping their past selves accomplish anything, even though it seems that way. What they're doing is, it's obviously Glitter's plan, or I'm assuming it's Glitter's plan, to help the adults regain their imagination by interacting with their child selves. Because what I'm assuming happens is the Archduke attacks in 2025, defeats the ToQger, and he reestablishes the shadow line, and there's no opposition for him at that point. And then Glitter says, well, in order to stop this, I'm going to open up a time portal to send the modern ToQger back in time so they can learn to morph, since they're the only ones that can defeat the shadow line. That's my idea of what's happening. The child ToQger were able to defeat the Grand Duke without any interference from the future. Because the way that Wright and the others tell what happened, they're not remembering it like, oh, we were children and our adult selves came to us and intervened and helped us win. No, that's not the case at all. The way that Wright and the others are telling it is that we were children, we solved this on our own without our adult selves, and now they're coming back without knowledge of that. So it's not a case of Wright knowing the outcome as an adult and guiding his younger self in order to go ahead and come to that certain outcome. No, the outcome has already happened. It's a positive outcome. It's just the ToQger are interacting with their younger selves for their benefit. For the adults' benefit, that is. It's a little bit confusing because here's the problem I have with it, is that it's needlessly complicated to where we don't need to travel back in time. Now I'm going to get to this overall child persona and adult selves and all that kind of stuff in the following video when I talk about the series as a whole. But it seemed like what they wanted to do was get the adult actors and the child actors on screen together before the child actors hit puberty and can no longer actually play the child roles. That's what it seems like to me. But it's not telling a particularly interesting adventure, because it would be one thing if the ToQger had lost this battle and their adult selves from the future come back to change the past, saying this is the point in history where we can change it. Now, that would have been cliche, and we've seen that 100 times, but I would rather go with cliche than going with worthlessness, because it's like, basically what they're saying is that the adults had no impact on the past whatsoever, forgetting things like the butterfly effect and stuff like that. I mean, the future should have changed in some capacity, but it doesn't really. I mean, if you really look at this film and kind of break it down, the child versions of themselves were able to accomplish everything without the adults. They did not need the adults to accomplish what they did. Yes, they interfered, but I think if you really take the adult versions out of the picture altogether, it's definitely clear that the children would have won anyway. That's what I'm trying to go ahead and point out here. So it seems needlessly convoluted to go ahead and do this. But I see what they're trying to do with it, is that they are trying to get their adult selves to regain their imagination so they could fight the Grand Duke in the future. Now, there is no mention that the Grand Duke defeats the adult ToQger in 2025, but that's what I take away from the film, is that the Grand Duke has to have defeated them in order for Glare to open the time portal in the first place. And I am assuming she opened it from the present, the future. Simply because it doesn't make sense for her to do it in the past to open it, simply because they're winning. Why do we need to bring the adults in anyway? Not to mention, why would Glare bring them to a time before she even had the idea to open the time portal with her past self? I know this is getting confusing, and I apologize for that. But again, if you watch the movie, kind of break it down. But again, I think story-wise, the reason this is happening is that the future ToQger, well, you know what? They're just depressing. They really are. Here's the thing about it. The film is trying to say that they've grown up and that they've lost their imagination, and that is something that is natural. And that's something that's kind of repeated throughout the film, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But that they lost their imagination. They're adults now. Their lives seem really boring. They seem rather bleak. They seem almost defeated. And the only person who seems even more like himself is Right. But even as we continue through the film, he seems to be defeated. What we look at when we see this is we see the five ToQger grown up, but the world has defeated them. It's not the shadow line, but it's just growing up and life that has defeated them. I mean, look at the opening scene that we have. First of all, look at the color palette. Look how everything is muted. Look how boring and dull everything looks. There's not a smidgen of color in there. Nothing that really pops out to you. Whoever did the color on this, I mean, they were obviously given directions to make it muted, because it does look muted. It doesn't look flashy. It doesn't look bright like we've seen throughout the series. It seems rather dull. It seems gray, for lack of a better term. Then we see them talking about their lives, Talk about Kagura's parents opening another restaurant, and all Kagura could go ahead and say is basically, yeah, so what? And then Hikari's like, we're going to take that test, yada yada, whatever, and stuff like that. I mean, the only person who's even animated is Takachi, but it's not even like he's animated for being fun. It's just that he's kind of a spaz, which I don't even know if that's the appropriate word, but you guys know what I'm trying to go ahead and say. The way he's acting is just like, neurotic, I guess, would be the better term. And it's not even like endearing. Even when we see Right, he seems to be the most animated of the bunch, the more childlike of the characters, because that's what they say. But again, he seems so, as we get through the film, he seems so defeated on his fate. It's like he's like telling his younger self, don't bother to do this or don't do that, or you're going to grow up and lose your imagination. It's not actually until Right gets his imagination back, when he actually morphs, that he becomes his old self again. But all the ToQger at the beginning of this film just look sad. And what I think the film is trying to tell us, because the film is talking about growing up, and how it's natural, and how losing your imagination as you grow up is natural. But man, is it sad. Because it's basically saying the ToQger, the heroes of the rainbow line, those with the greatest imagination, will eventually lose it, and they'll be pathetic, boring adults. Now, I don't know what's going on in the rest of their lives, but it's just kind of like you meet up your old friend from high school, and you were in high school together, and it's kind of like, we're going to do amazing things. I'm going to go to Hollywood and go be a film star. I'm going to go to Broadway and do this, or I'm going to go to college and become a banker. I'm going to do all these amazing things. And then you get back with your friends after about 10 years or so, and like, what are you up to? I got 3 kids. I'm working at McDonald's. Oh, well, I got 1 kid, and I'm working at the dump. That's kind of what it feels like. It's like these people with these ambitions and dreams went out to do those amazing things, but they didn't succeed, and now here they are, shells of what they originally were. And that's very depressing. That's at least what I'm taking from it. The film is trying to say that they get their imagination back, but they're basically saying is that they're going to lose it anyway. And if it wasn't for the interference from the time portal, then they wouldn't have gotten it back. And what would their lives have been at that point? And here's another thing that's also depressing. So when the Grand Duke shows up, they actually run away from him. Okay, as children, when they see the Grand Duke, what do? They morph and go in to fight him. They're just rushing in, charging in to do it. But somewhere along the way, they've lost the will to fight. I mean, even to the point where I think Kagura is like throwing her purse at the Grand Duke, and she's walking, and Mio's like walking on his heels, trying to stand straight, doesn't even bother fighting. And I'm like, what the hell happened to you people? I mean, it's kind of like Batman showing up, after 10 years of not being Batman, and the Two-Face shows up with his gang and all that, and all Bruce can do is throw his watch at him. Not even a bat watch, just a Rolex. I mean, it's really pathetic with these characters. And also, they don't even attempt to morph. Well, we do find out later in the movie that they can't because they lost their imagination, but they don't even attempt to do it. They just run away like cowards. Now, here's where I have a problem with the overall continuity of Super Sentai. Because one of the overall problems I have with ToQger is not enough forward thinking on their plot in the overall whole of the Sentai universe. Now, you can say that about a number of other Sentai shows, but I think ToQger is the most egregious. And again, I'll get into more detail about that when we get into the closeout video. But for the movie specifically, this film takes place in the year 2017-2025. So what's confusing to me is we know the 40th anniversary is coming up soon. And this came out this past summer, too. So you're telling me that the child versions of ToQger are still active somewhere. Because between now and 2025, as far as that is, there's going to be another crossover where the ToQger and the other characters, or the other Sentai, are going to get together in some sort of battle. Whether it's the versus the Metal Heroes versus Kamen Rider, whether it's another legendary war, whether it's any of those types of things, we know that the ToQger are going to be involved again. I mean, heck, in 2 months, we're going to have ToQger versus Ninja. And, of course, the question is, are these going to be the adult forms from the future, or are they going to be the child forms from the year 2015-2016? We don't really know that at this particular point. Yeah, we get promotional images, but it doesn't really tell us anything about the story. What I'm getting at here is that in 2017, they're still children fighting. So you're telling me the next time we see the ToQger in any type of continuity with the overall Sentai universe, we're going to see, say we have another legendary war for GoFundMe, we're going to see 4-foot-tall ToQger fighting with everybody? Is that what's happening? And then we're talking about, again, the 2025 here. So you're telling me also that the ToQger lost their powers somewhere along the line because they lost their imagination? And yet they still have their morphers and they still have their Ressha? Well, again, I know there's going to be another crossover. There's going to be some other event that's happening. Again, the Ninja crossover is proving that. So are there other ToQger that you've hired? Are you going to pull them from the past through via Time Hole like you do Time Force and a bunch of other teams and stuff? I mean, again, I don't understand the purpose of the whole children thing, but this is screwing up the continuity of whole in Sentai, because here's what's going to happen. Let's say GoFundMe does a legendary war, just for the sake of what if. Then you have to have 4-foot-tall ToQger in there, unless you want to claim that you brought them from the future, and then it has to be a post-2025 event, simply because anything prior to 2025, as adults, they don't have their imagination powers. Because I'm going to assume they lost the imagination somewhere around high school. Just as a guess, that's probably where it happened. So, from any future writer who wants to bring the ToQger back into the fold, whether it is this Ninja crossover or not, you either have to have them 4-foot-tall children, or you have to do some sort of time travel plot to bring in the adult forms, or even give them imagination and turn them into adults from the Rainbow line, which to me is just stupid, because I was stupid to begin with. So you see what I'm saying? They're really screwing themselves over here, especially with the time travel, the child thing, yada, yada, yada. That's going to be a big thing when we get into the whole overall Sentai experience. Okay, here's another thing, too, is that we see Glitter, we see Nero, we see Schwartz, all those guys, we see Mork. Here's the thing. Those villains are clones or shadow copies, if you will. They're not the real deal because the Grand Duke basically made them out of nothingness, except for Glitter, who is really there. But here's the problem I have with Glitter is that she shows up and there is absolutely no mention of Zet anywhere in this. Because you would think that if he was still alive at the end of the series, that naturally he would reappear in the following film. Now, I'm not saying he has to do that, but you really left it ambiguous as to exactly what happened to him, and then you go to the links to show that Glitter is still alive and that Glitter is responsible for their time traveling. So where's Zet? Is Zet responsible for this? Is he becoming a secret ally of the ToQger? I mean, what's happening here? I'm not sure what's going on, and they're not explaining it to us. So I'd really like to know, guys, what's up with Zet? Where is he? And then what's going on at the Grand Duke? Because it says that he says he was exiled, and now he's come to take over 2 or 3 years after the fall of Zet. Why was he exiled? Again, we've seen in the series that there was a prison under the Terminal Castle, where they do keep, guys who get in trouble and prisoners and stuff. Was he there? Was he in the other reaches of darkness? That hasn't been established. And why was he exiled in the first place? This guy doesn't seem any different than any of the other characters we've seen. What makes him so worthy of exile? I don't see that. I don't get that. Okay, also, I want to talk about ToQ Nanago, who is, spoiler, the conductor! Yay, the conductor. I like that part because here's the thing. He said that he liked action movies. He wanted to be ToQ Rokugo, but he couldn't be those things, and now he's gotten promotion from being conductor to basically chief of security of the Rainbow Line, and now he's become the Purple Ranger. Yeah, and that's another thing too. Is like they don't give him the colors here, but does anybody else find it odd that Sentai doesn't like the word purple? That Geiki violet and all that kind of stuff. Everything's violet, nothing's purple. Power Rangers has a problem with that too. They can't use the word purple. They got to use the word violet. I don't get that. But moving on. What's really weird about his appearance in this? Well, first of all, let's talk about the continuity of it. He first appears to ToQger in 2017, and he tries to interfere with them. He helps them out when they go to look for Akira and they don't find him, and he helps them out in the fight against Tank Top Shadow, and we'll get into him. And then he doesn't get involved with the battle later on in 2017. And then he doesn't appear again until 2025, and that is the time in which the child versions and the adult versions of ToQger finally find out that he is indeed the conductor. The conductor is ToQ Nanago. So you're telling me that for, this entire span of 10 years, that the conductor never revealed himself to our ToQger? That we have future ToQger appearances, and that the conductor never told him that he was chief of security? Because he obviously became chief of security and left the Rainbow Line around 2017 because Wagon is the conductor along with Ticket. So he's been chief of security for a while. He's been the Violet Ranger, or the Purple Ranger, excuse me. See, even I got it. He's been the Purple Ranger for a while, but he just doesn't reveal that until the end. And then, of course, the whole thing about his Zord, because all he essentially is a recoloring of our Six Ranger, of our Orange Ranger. He doesn't even have his own unique weapon or sidearm. Everything's just kind of recolored. He even has the same morpher, which you can argue that that's the way they're going, that the iPhone morphers are a lot better than the wrist-mounted ones. However, I always like wrist-mounted morphers no matter what they look like. And where's his Zord? Because we see it kind of in the morphine sequence, but all it is a purple Bill Dio, and I would love for him to come out with that toy. I mean, Bill Dio is actually my favorite of all the Ressha from the series, so let's get a violet Bill Dio. That would be awesome to go ahead and have. And, again, the movie is called Super ToQ Nanago of Dreams. He appears twice in the film, once at the beginning for less than a couple of minutes, and then at the end of the film in a battle sequence. So why was the film named after him when he doesn't show up at all? I mean, here is my understanding of the film based on the pre-release. It was that the adult ToQger have lost their imaginations and that the Violet Ranger has to come in and now teach them how to be, ToQger again. I did not understand. I did not know that they were going to go back in time and meet their former selves. I mean, based on the descriptions I heard, is it was going to take place in the future or their present, and all of them have to get together. There would be the Seven Rangers, and there would be some mystery about this guy, and then he would be revealed later on as to who he was. That was my understanding of the story, but that's not at all what we got from this. We didn't get anything about him. The fact that he's in the film is just kind of, hooray, another ranger, we can now officially complete the rainbow. Because that's actually another thing, is like, I always wonder, like, there's 7 colors in the rainbow, yet you only have 6 rangers and one of them's pink. But if you take certain liberties with it, pink does kind of fit. But again, that's kind of a different thing altogether. But it is odd that, again, his name is in the title. It's like having the movie Old Yeller, and Old Yeller only appears at the end of the film to be shot. That's kind of what this is about. It's kind of weird. It's it's almost like Captain America: The Winter Soldier, now that I think about it, because the Winter Soldier doesn't factor in too much to the overall plot. I mean, it should have been called Captain America: Rise of Hydra or something like that. But whatever. I digress on that subject. Um. Oh, I have an interesting fan theory that I do want to share with you guys before we get into our final topic and in the meat of this film. So, I have noted 2 things throughout the ToQger series, and I think this film actually helps a little bit on my theories. I always felt that Wright was American or from America at some point in his life. Because you notice that series, he wears the shirts that say Brooklyn and New York City, and he says English phrases, and he eats a lot like a typical American, or at least that's the way that they are portrayed or thought in the collective consciousness. More so that I realize that now, since being here for about almost 5 months. But my point is, I always got the feeling that he was connected to America in some way. Now, 2 interesting things in this film happen. One, it's established that as a child he is moving away from Subaru-Gahama, and that his grandfather and his mother and his 2 siblings are of course going with him. And second, he is wearing a Miami University T-shirt. Now, not the U, but I'm talking about Miami of Ohio, Oxford, Ohio. The team in the MAC. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've been to a lot of stores in Tokyo, Kyoto, Sapporo, wherever around this country, and you don't get any college teams out there. Mainly what you get is the Jets and the Yankees, which is kind of odd. But I have not seen any Miami of Ohio. I mean, that's a relatively obscure college when you talk about college football, unless you're talking about, the cradle of coaches and things like that. I mean, it's a MAC school. Nobody cares about the MAC. I do, but in general, watch ESPN. Look how many times they cover Miami of Ohio, and you'll see my point. But the thing is, that's a very obscure shirt to go ahead and have for a Japanese person. So here's my theory. Since we don't see Wright's father throughout the series, what if Wright's father has been in America this whole time? That he's had a job over there working in Ohio somewhere, let's say. Maybe he's working in Oxford. Maybe he's working for the university itself. And the reason that Wright is moving is that he is moving to America with his family to be with his father. And that the reason he has this shirt at the end is because he went to Miami, or his father works at Miami. And the way this works retroactively through the series is that his father had been sending him clothing from America, which is why he has that shirt that says Brooklyn. His father went to New York and got him a couple of things from New York to send him. Say, hey, son, I'm sorry I can't be there, but I'm going to send you this as a gift. Do you like it? I'll see you soon when you and your mom get here and stuff. That actually works pretty well when you think about it. I don't know if it really informs us to his character, but man, it would explain a lot of things. But again, this shirt, I don't know, I picked up on it because I'm just a college football junkie for stuff like that. It's just like, Miami of Ohio, that's like the most random thing. And he's even on the DVD cover wearing that shirt. That is just like the oddest thing for him to be wearing. I don't know, it's just really strange to me. But again, that's my fan theory about Wright, and take it for what you will. All right, now let's get to one of the dumbest and deepest things in this film. So we have the introduction of another shadow creature in addition to the Grand Duke. Because the Grand Duke's ultimate plan is to not only defeat the ToQger, but bring Akira back to his side, make him a monster again. And he's able to achieve capturing Akira in the past through the help of the tank top shadow. Because, surprise, surprise, the retcon of the year goes to the fact that Akira's tank top through the entire series has been alive. I kid you not. That is what they're saying, that his tank top has been a shadow this entire time, has been sentient, and has been with him throughout the entire series. Boy, that makes up so many questions. Because you would think, if he's his friend and he's wearing him, then maybe he'd want to come out and fight and help. Is that something he might want to do? And let's also not forget that Akira pointed out in one of his early episodes that he doesn't understand friendship, and yet his best friend is his shirt. Okay? Oh, but here's the kicker. It turns out that his tank top shall betrayed Akira because the tank top wants to return to the Shao line. Why does he want to return to the Shao line? Well, it turns out, if you remember the Shao line, you are essentially immortal because you don't grow old and you don't die. But because both Akira and the tank top Shao are part of the Rainbow line, they are going to grow old and die. As a result, they're no longer mortal. Thank you, ToQger, for adding in the dumbest thing possible. Because, let's look at it this way, alright? You have the Shao line, you have the Rainbow line, and they are locked in internal struggle between light and dark, okay? And of course you're going to need every advantage that you can, alright? The Shao line has its monsters and it has the power of darkness. The Rainbow line has the power of imagination and it has its trains. Trains that travel across the galaxy, no less. And apparently one of the tools utilized in the Shao line is their immortality. Now, yes, they can be destroyed and they can be killed, but if they don't engage in battle and get destroyed by a blaster or a sword, they're like elves, basically. They can't be harmed by disease or old age or anything like that. They can be killed in battle. But the Rainbow line, whether it's through, as Elrond would say, the slow decay of time or by the sword, they will eventually die. That seems like a disadvantage towards the Rainbow line, because basically what it's saying is that we over at the Shao line can not only propagate and create more of us through darkness and reproduction and whatnot, but none of us are going to go ahead and die, so maybe if we just wait a few centuries, sharp our numbers and all that. Whereas the ToQger are basically saying, in the Rainbow line, it's like, yeah, our soldiers and everybody's going to go ahead and die eventually, and we're going to have to replace them and bring up new generations and, like normal things and all that. And Akira, since he's part of the Rainbow line, becomes mortal. So, I'm sorry, it's just like, that's a revelation that we found out here in this movie that, one, would have been nice to know throughout the series, because then we would have understood more about Akira's sacrifice to go to the Rainbow line, to sacrifice his immortality, to protect the rainbow for something he believes in. Now, that ultimately works to Akira's benefit as a character. Even the whole thing about this is my place to die, which he should not be saying in this movie because he got over it in the final episode. But the whole place to die, it's like, yeah, if I would stay where I was and did what I was doing, I wouldn't die. But here I am going to, martyr myself, sacrifice myself, whatever. It's more than just a death wish. It's a realization of his new worldview, his new ideology. That works for Akira. But in the overall context of your war between good and evil, it's really, really hard to side with good in this because, again, it's the biggest flaw. And I don't know if the Rainbow line can make people immortal or anything like that. You think with imagination you can imagine being immortal and that would work. But does that mean that Wagon will eventually die, and that Ticket will eventually die, and the Rainbow Present will eventually take off his head and die? I mean, the whole thing is just as far as retcons go, that has got to be one of the stupidest, not only for introducing this mortality and immortality thing, but the fact that this tank top has been on Akira the entire time. But here's where it gets interesting. Here is what I do like about it. The tank top shadow leaves Akira, goes back to his shadow line because he doesn't want to grow old and die. That's his conflict here. He doesn't want to go ahead and die. So he wants Akira to be with him. He wants to bring Akira over back to his side because he doesn't want to see his best friend die. The person he's essentially been attached to this entire time. And that's very moving. I like that because then you bring up the ethical dilemma, if you will, is that, you know, to be good and to live and die and grow old, or to be on the side of evil and to be immortal with that. I mean, that is an ethical dilemma, and I think one that a lot of people would have difficulty looking at. Now, of course, given the fact that in the Sentai universe, there is a concept of heaven or hell and all that, there is a good bet that the Shadow Monster realizes that there is indeed an afterlife, and given any dark deeds that he's done, may not be going to heaven, may be going to hell with Rio, Melee, and whoever, and Black Cross and whatnot. So he is put in this existential dilemma, that he wants his friend, but he also doesn't want to go ahead and die and wants to bring his friend over. And he doesn't, and talk about Tank Top Shadow, he doesn't do anything for a malicious purpose. He does it out of love and friendship for Akira. And I like that. That's great. He even sacrifices himself in the film. Now, of course, that's undone. I mean, well, here's the thing. It's like, that's great because he's a person who does not want to die, and what does he do? He sacrifices himself for his friend. The whole reason he did this, he gave up his life just so his friend could live a little bit longer. That's very powerful stuff. Now that is underdone by the fact that when we get to 2025 and Akira is around, he was somehow able to resurrect his friend, and Tank Top Shadow is still alive, only to eventually die again. Yeah, that's kind of basically what happens, is he's immortal, becomes mortal, dies, becomes mortal again, and will die again. I mean, I don't know. That again, it undercuts his story. But here's what got him to basically turn around on the whole matter, and this is where Wright misses the point completely, because Wright has a PhD from the University of Missing the Point. The whole problem with the Tank Top Shadow is that he does not want to die. He does not want to grow old and die. What is Wright's counter to this? And I quote from the translation on here. There's nothing scary about growing up. I want to grow up with Akira. Let me repeat that. There is nothing scary about growing up. Do you see where he's missing the point here? The Tank Top Shadow is not talking about moving from childhood to adolescence to adulthood. He's talking about facing the specter of death and the end of his existence. Right? He's talking about growing up and no longer being a child and having to go to middle school. Do you see what I'm saying? That he's missing the point. The Tank Top Shadow's entire argument is, I don't want to die. Akira's argument, Wright's argument is, it's not scary to grow up. Again, it's like you're talking on frickin' Fox News. Brings up a legitimate argument and point as to why he's motivated to do something, and then brings up the argument that has absolutely nothing to do with what he was trying to say. If the Tank Top Shadow was a child, and he didn't want to grow up and be an adult, he wanted to be perpetually a child, then yes, that would make sense. But no, right? That is not what is happening. He doesn't want to die. You're not even talking about death. That's not even crossing your mind about the potential of death because you are a child. You are more concerned about moving to America and moving away from your friends and, going to graduation with Akira. That is what you are concerned about. Nothing you are thinking about has anything to do with death. But it has everything to do with why the Tank Top Shadow is doing what he is doing. He does not want to die, and he does not want his friend to die. But right, you're talking about growing up. Yeah, growing up is not scary. Dying is freaking scary. So why isn't this covered? Why isn't this something that is discussed? it seems to me that that's what the story was trying to be about, was about the mortality and the transition of life, that you are a child and you can't stay a child forever, and that you have imagination, that you eventually lose that imagination because you grow up, and that the finality of that is indeed death. Now, if you wanted to make a story about that, that would have been an awesome story. That would have been great. But no, you have that story in there, but then you have Wright turn it 180 around and completely ignore the point that this tank top shot was trying to make. Why? Why did you do that? What's the point? Why didn't you continue on? Because maybe Wright needs to have that realization that maybe the tank top shadow has a point here. You know, maybe you do want to explore what it means to die and all that. Maybe have Akira die in this only to be resurrected to make that point drive home, basically. I mean, I I, I don't get it. I really don't. His line is, there's nothing scary about growing up. His line should be, yeah, there is something scary about dying, and I completely understand your motivations and justification for what you're doing. But again, that doesn't cross their minds. That, to me, could have made this movie. If they would have focused on that, about the growing up, the mortality, and how it's natural for these things. Because what does Yoda say? That, you know, it's a natural part of... To die is a natural part of life. That is what Yoda says in Revenge of the Sith. Right? So why isn't that part of the film? Maybe we get to the point where that's when the conductor came in and gave this message about that it's natural to do this stuff. His fears are justified, whatever, and all that. I mean, again, it doesn't explore that, and I don't know what else to say to you guys to make you understand that. Is that it had this great theme in there, but it completely brushes it off by, again, ignoring the point that he was trying to make, and come up with a different point about growing up. And again, that's fine, but they're juxtaposed to each other. There is a significant difference about growing up and dying. And Wright doesn't get that. None of the other ToQger get that. And nobody else seems to get that except the tank top shadow. But again, his entire story is undercut by the fact that he is resurrected by Akira by the year 2025. Alright. That's enough ranting, I think. I think I've made my point on this. So, overall, what do I think about this film? Again, it had a great idea in there. It just didn't capitalize on it. I don't know why the film is titled with Nanago in there when he barely is featured in here, and I don't understand the whole time travel plot. I think that if you limit it to the adult versions, if you limit it to the conductor being the main protagonist, maybe, and bringing up this story of mortality and death and how that relates with growing up and imagination, then I think you have had an interesting story, something that was deep, philosophical, made people think. Because here's the thing, guys. Yes, it is a kid show, if you want to call it that. All right, I tend to don't put that label on it because I think it can do more. And this is an instance in where it can do more. It can go outside of those norms. It doesn't have to be limited to, you know, growing up is not scary, which is a message I'm sure children get all the time. It could focus on something a little bit deep, a little bit more heavy-handed, but we don't get that, and that's the most frustrating thing, is that you could do it, but you choose not to. You almost do it, but then you undermine yourself in your own story. And that's what kind of bothers me about this particular film. Alright, so now we are done with all the ToQger except the Ninja, but since that's coming out in theaters in 2 months, and it will be a while before I can get a translation of that film, for the time being, I'm not going to go ahead and cover it. Maybe I'll do a vlog, maybe I'll go see the movie and talk to you guys about it, but I'm probably not going to do an in-depth analysis until there's an English translation to it, because unfortunately, despite 5 months here in the wild, I still cannot speak or understand Japanese that well, just because I am an idiot. Nevertheless, I will have for you guys next my final closing thoughts on ToQger as a whole. I'm going to go over the entire series, all the movies I've covered, and I'm going to talk to you guys in depth about that and what my overall thoughts were of ToQger, and we will finally put ToQger to a close. So, until next time, the tavern is now closed.